to our Playwell podcast. My name is Sherry Morgan and I'm the Director of Projects at Play Scotland, the national organisation for play. Today our Play Pedagogy Officer, Fiona Kirkland, speaks to Leanne Sweaton. Leanne is currently working in Fife as a principal teacher, supporting schools to close the poverty-related attainment gap. Leanne has founded a Facebook page called Playpiece, which has over 7,000 followers, giving advice and practical ideas to practitioners looking to develop their play pedagogy practice. I hope you enjoy their conversation.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Playwell podcast. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined with Leanne Sweaton. If you've been anywhere near the Scottish play pedagogy scene lately, or even internationally, you may have seen her brilliant Facebook group Playpiece, or you might be one of the 7,500 people following her. I know I definitely am. Or sometimes you maybe have actually caught her speaking at events like the Scottish Learning Festival or Playfest. Leanne has over 23 years of experience in education, and the play began with one very simple comment from a colleague that completely changed her perspective. She's recently worked as play connector for the South East Improvement Collaborative, supporting schools across 5 local authorities to build confidence and capacity in play pedagogy. So, to kick us off, Leanne, what does play mean to you?
What it does mean is getting back to nature for me, which versus society. And as we know, society is evolving and changing all the time, especially with technological advances and things like that. So for me, play is very much about nature. It's very natural for children. It's about getting back to the basics. It's about children discovering who they are and how they fit, within the world. And the one thing that probably I would say as play is just happiness. You will never see a child unhappy in play, unless, of course, they've come against a conflict of some kind. But even then, once the conflict's resolved, they go back to this really happy, joyful state, which is, I suppose, the place we all want to be mentally all the time. So yeah, I think that's what play means for me, is just pure happiness.
I love that. That's brilliant. Pure happiness. I think we should play pure happiness. I think that's a great tagline, isn't it? So can you tell me a wee bit about, we sort of touched on in the intro a wee bit about your journey into play pedagogy, but what first sparked it and how really has that shaped you and how you support others?
My journey did start probably a good 8-9 years ago now, which is just unbelievable to say. Probably back in 2016. And I'm sure I've said this story on my play piece and with people that I speak to, but a colleague of mine who's also called Leanne, I'll give her a wee shout out. She was in primary 1 and I'd been in primary 1 before, but anyway, she was leaving to go and work in China and I was taking over as the primary 1 class teacher, and I was super excited because, infants are definitely my forte. I love working with infants. So she said, you're coming into primary 1, just to let you know, and this honestly is the comment, just to let you know, the children need to play more. And that is what started this journey for me, because I was like, what do you mean they need to play more? Do children not play already? What is the meaning behind this? So then I went down a real sort of journey of discovery, lots of research, the Anna F. Grave, there's Greg Bottrell, there's so many other people. What's his name? Is it Alan Gray in America? Some of his stuff is just amazing. I just went on a journey of discovery. So I got into my primary 1 classroom and I thought, where do the children play then? Where are the opportunities for them to play? And that's really how the journey began. And year on year, as I read more and I got to know more and, upskill, I went to visit other people who'd already been on a play pedagogy journey. And I just got a real passion for it. And it's probably one of the things that I've been most passionate about as a class teacher. And it goes back to what I said before, because when I saw children in play, their motivation and their engagement and their happiness was just there for everyone to see. And who, as a practitioner, as a class teacher, doesn't want to see high levels of engagement, motivation and happiness in their classroom? So that's really, that's how my journey kind of began. We got inspected. My school got inspected in 2020. I was really nervous about the inspectors coming in. That was just before realising the ambition Being Me was launched. So I hadn't even seen that document. So I wasn't sure if they were going to agree with what I was doing. I was very clear on my rationale about why I was approaching teaching and learning in that way. And I was happy to share that with them, but I wasn't sure what they were going to think of it. They came in and they absolutely loved it. And that propelled me then probably the last 5 years in doing what I now do and promoting play wherever I can, talking about play wherever I can. I've had opportunities to work with Education Scotland on their Play Pedagogy Toolkit, work obviously with the CIC, and I'm sorry that funding's come to an end now, but I've really enjoyed working across loads of local authorities. And yeah, I do a lot of work for Fife, and I did a lot of work for my previous school at the that I was in before this role. It wasn't really planned. I didn't plan out to be this play person, but I just love it so much. I love talking about it so much. And then, of course, Play Piece was born then back in February 2024 when I was sitting in my lodge in Auchterarder.
Well, that's handy because I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually I'm just going to ask you because I'm really, really intrigued about what actually inspired you to create it. And what are you hoping it brings to the wider community? And obviously 7,500 followers at the moment and constantly growing.
To go back to that question, the reason why Play Piece was born was out of that tagline that I ended up creating to nurture an appetite for play in Scottish education. I just want people to get on board with play pedagogy, realise its value, its importance, not just in classrooms, but in society as a whole for our children moving forward. So Play Piece was born out of the fact that, there's so many other great pages out there. I actually started the Scottish primary teachers page as well, but that was like years and years ago with a friend of mine. But I was always posting on different pages about, my play experiences and what I thought about this and what I thought about that. And I thought, I'm posting in all these different places and I'm copying and sharing and things. And I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to make my own page and see if I can maybe get people to follow me. And by that time, obviously, some people already knew me from my work with the CIC and Playfest and the Learning Festival and things like that. So I was already known, across professional bodies as being somebody who was really passionate about play. So yeah, but I was not expecting my 7,600 now, Fiona. It just went up this week. And it's been really frustrating this year because I created it and I used to post daily play pieces, really using the word play piece because obviously that's a very Scottish word. And this job that I'm in currently, I've had to take a wee bit of a step back and sort of posting on that. But when I do see things, I try and post them. And at the moment, I just did some professional learning on writing in primary one. So I promised my followers that I will start posting about that next week. But yeah, I'm thrilled with Play Piece. It's everything that I wanted and more. And what I want people, to get out of it is just that passion for giving play a go and seeing what it can do for the learners in your classroom.
And there is so much confusion just now about play and free play and play pedagogy. Yes. And I think that's really tricky, isn't it? It's getting that across that it's play, but actually it's when you add the word pedagogy to it, obviously the pedagogy is the art of teaching and learning, so whenever you start to actually add that into it, it makes it a wee bit different. And I know certainly, I'm sure you probably find this as well when you get into schools, I think they're really worried about what we're sort of advocating, that it's a sort of free for all. I think they think that we're going to say, right, just stick the kids in the room and they can do what they like all day. And that's not really what we're saying, is it?
No.
That's really not what we're saying. So why do you think there's a distinction between, obviously free play and play pedagogy? When you're working with schools, how would you sort of explain that to schools, the sort of distinction?
I think play pedagogy is very much an approach. And it will always be an approach to teaching and learning, just like we have an approach to how we teach numeracy or how we teach writing. Play pedagogy is just another approach to how we deliver really high quality learning, teaching and assessment. So I would say that it's definitely just an approach. It is not the only approach either that we use in our classrooms, because there are lots of things that children still need to be taught explicitly and cannot learn through play. What play does for children, though, which sets it apart from any other pedagogy or any other approach, is it's natural and it's highly motivating and it's highly engaging. And for me, and I say this a lot, is that as a class teacher, if I was to sit down and plan a week's worth of experiences and outcomes, benchmarks, I would maybe hit, 10 for say, over the week with maybe not even the majority of my learners, but most of my learners. What I think play pedagogy does do as an approach is it allows children to experience lots of experiences and outcomes and benchmarks very naturally and just freely without any sort of direction. So it is really hard to get that distinction across, and it is due to lack of training still. I still think there's a lot for the councils to do. And until it becomes a mandatory requirement, I suppose, in our schools, because you've got lots of schools that are doing some fantastic work around play pedagogy, and you've got other schools who are still very reluctant to dip their toe in the water and try it out. So definitely it needs to become more of a, something in the Scottish Government, the Scottish Education, where we're now, this is the expectation. And I know we do have Realising the Ambition Be Me, but I still don't feel there's enough expectation from the powers that be that govern us to say, no, we want our schools to take a road down to play pedagogy, because we believe developmentally this is the best thing for our children. So it definitely needs that. And once we get that behind us, then we can start to really build on creating, like what you have, Play Pedagogy Awards, things that schools can tap into and really start to train themselves. Right, okay, so what does this look like? But going back to my earlier point, play pedagogy it is an approach. I don't want to say just an approach. It is an approach to high quality learning, teaching, assessment. It's not the only approach, although I would argue it is the best one.
I would absolutely agree with that. I suppose that's the thing as well. Sometimes, we've got lots of schools now on our Play Pedagogy Award, and sometimes when you go into schools, what they're actually doing is play, but they don't recognise it. I don't know if you find that as well. Particularly in the upper school, we seem to have this idea that play is always about small children. Usually it involves sand, water, paint, mess, or it's just play. It's that frivolous activity, or it's that sort of add-on, isn't it? That it's, or worse, do you remember Golden Time?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd hope no schools would be doing that any longer, because it should never be something that's an award.
Yes.
Certainly in my experience, there'd be children who would know by a Monday afternoon they weren't going to get Golden Time, and really, and now we know, obviously, with the UNCRC being ratified into law, that is, our children have that right to play as well, which I think is really important to get across. And probably, unless, as you rightly say, unless we get that something behind that, then that right to play really just becomes sort of tokenistic, right, okay, you can play at playtime, or you've got half an hour on a Friday afternoon, you can play, again, it has to be that way. Actually, and we know from research that is the way children learn best. Froebel's been talking about it since the 1800s,
I know, and if you look back at all the researchers from, as you say, the 1800s, lots of the Piaget, Vygotsky, all those people were talking about the value of play. And I've just remembered I said Alan Gray. It's not Alan Gray, it's Peter Gray from America, who talks a lot about, I've just realised I quoted him wrong. If you look back at all the researchers, play has been around forever. And actually, it's the most natural way for children to learn. And I don't understand, that's, I suppose, what I really find difficult is I don't understand why people aren't tapping into what children do best, and what children do best is play.
That's it. And again, it's that real world, isn't it? Certainly one of the schools that on our Play Pedagogy Award is really interesting, and they had started with their primary ones doing play. To be fair, the admitted attainment did dip initially, but they continued on. So they did play in primary 1, they continued playing to primary 2. Now these children are now in primary 5. And actually, they are the best attainment they've ever had for a primary 5 class. And the reason is that, I think that a lot of the reason is that they understand it. They understand, because they've done that real learning. They understand the foundational concepts of mathematics. They've done that hands-on learning. So rather than just rote learning, where you're sort of just remembering things, which, it seems to sometimes happen, or you've got a worksheet, for instance, I think it's so important that we recognise that, and that really, really works. touched on sort of Froebel there. So obviously he talks about his like freedom of guidance. And obviously that's that idea of giving children space, but within that supportive, well-prepared environment. How do you help schools sort of strike that balance between sort of stepping in and sort of stepping back?
That is a real tricky concept.
I would like to make it easy for you.
No, teachers like to be in control. Teachers, are there to do a job. They're there to teach, and they want to teach and do well. And with that comes a level of control, and they have control over their classroom and control over what children do at any given time of the day. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest takeaways that I have had in a change in my practice, is giving that control over to the children and allowing the children to lead and develop themselves. But still, like you said, in a very highly structured, highly planned environment. And that high structuring and planning comes from spending time with the children when they are playing, and, like I've said before, it's about not using just play as your only approach, but definitely using it as one approach within your room where you're going to get high motivation and engagement. You're going to get children who are happy and love playing, and using those moments to step in. And sometimes it's just to observe. It's just, you get so much information by just watching children about their health and well-being, about their social and emotional well-being, about how they communicate with one another, about the things that they are interested in, about the things that they do and they can't do. So yeah, there has to be a balance. But I know because teachers like to be in control and they like to know what's going on and they like to do the next thing, they sometimes, step in too soon or don't step in enough. And it's really difficult to get that balance. But the one thing I do try to say to anybody who I work with is, my top tip is, if you're going to spend lots of your planning time planning these spaces for these experiences to happen for your children, and then you don't go and watch what happens, what is the point? What is the actual point in spending all that time and creating this amazing sand tray with all these resources, or a water tray with all these resources, or giving children large and small block play and loose parts and all these sorts of things? I've seen some fantastic classroom spaces, but teachers don't allow themselves time to go and look. And that's where you strike the balance, because, again, going back to my earlier point, is they just don't feel like they have the time. They don't feel like they have the permission. But my argument to them is, well, what's the point then? Why have you set up that's where you need that investment of, I've set this up because this is what I want to create. And I'm going to look at what I've created and what it's doing for my children. And I'm going to use that to feed into my planning and the delivery of other parts of the curriculum. And until you do that, it's just play spaces in a room. And lots of the time you just see sand trays that have had the same resources out the whole year round, which I find really frustrating. And again, it's no fault of that teacher. It's just teacher time, lack of training, lack of passion. I don't know what it is, but it's a whole load of barriers to that.
I think that's the thing. It is making sure that's that rich environment.
Yeah.
It's like, I always think ratio and the environment being the third teacher is so important. Like, if you can get your environment right, then it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you.
Absolutely.
And I think that is so important about that. The adult role in creating that space is massive, isn't it? And sometimes as well, you get that thing where sometimes people look at play and they've put out like some sort of, I always say sort of Instagram perfect or Pinterest perfect tough tray. And for your own experience, within 5 minutes, that's just going to be completely not, look like that any longer.
Yeah.
But they've spent so much time actually thinking about how it looks rather than actually the things that the children can do in it. Obviously we've got the purpose behind it, or the affordances that actually those loose parts actually have, because something simple like a block can be so many different things, for children. And sometimes, I don't know if you find this as well, but you go into school sometimes and they've got loads of really good resources in the early years. in the sort of lower school, but they don't actually have those sort of resources in the upper school. And I think that's really important as well, that we have those sorts of opportunities in upper school, because children will play with the same things, but they will play with them in a different way. There'll be a more complex way of playing with them. If you put, say, a water tray, I'm not advocating water trays in primary 7 unless you really, really want that.
Well, I would advocate for water trays in primary 7.
But if you
I
think
had a water tray in primary 7.
if you think of what a water tray actually you can do, like P7s will deal with that probably quite differently than they will in primary 1. Or even in early years, it will be very different. And again, it's using your skills as a teacher to sort of navigate that and sort of set that stage for play as well, and make it appropriate for, the sort of age and stage of the children as well. I think that's so important. And again, using that really important observation and thinking how you can extend that learning, and it is a tricky balance between, obviously we have to cover curricular goals. There is that, and I know certainly I've seen lots of different methods of how teachers do that. Do you have any tips of like how, I know some schools I work with, they'll have areas set out for play, but the teacher will maybe take children away and do some direct teaching with them. Because again, we still have to cover those curricular areas. Do you find that's quite a common approach?
Yes, definitely. And that is what I would advocate for, to have that 3-way approach of you've got your child-initiated play where the children are freely engaged in whatever spaces you have, but they're not being directed to where they go or what they do there. And you've definitely got, I would say, certainly in the infants, your children spend a lot of their time in that child-initiated phase. But within that, then you may have also teacher-initiated play as well. So that could be around your provocations, things that you've observed, and then you've changed your space in response to what you have seen so that you can extend the learning even further. And then, of course, you've got the teacher-directed type activities, which can still align with the play principles of what we're trying to achieve in terms of children leading learning as much as possible, really learning through discovery and experience and things like that. But you can bring those play principles into your actual direct teaching input. For me, there definitely has to be that 3-way approach, and I would certainly advocate for that all the way up to school, actually. What we had at Aberdour, where I worked, was when we created our play pedagogy all the way up to primary 7, we decided that we would have protected play times. So that really was about the child-initiated play, where children were freely allowed to go into the spaces and direct themselves in whichever way they wanted to go. Now, that looked very different in primary 1 as it did in primary 7. So whilst primary 1 probably spent a lot of their day moving between those 3 approaches, that's where we're still valuing that it's really important for children to play, but we also recognise that the curriculum and the progression in primary 7 looks very different. So it's about getting a mixture of that. You would still have 3 approaches further up the school, and we absolutely did. But the amount of time that children got to spend in the child-initiated phase, wasn't as long as you moved further up the school. Another top tip for schools, which we did at Aberdour, was we really examined our values, the teachers' values around play all the way up to primary 7. What we thought about play when we were younger, what we think about play now, what we think about play for our own children. And we spent quite a lot of time in our professional development just thinking about what play meant to us and what we really wanted to create in engaging with play as an approach to teaching and learning. So we came up with a variety of spaces that we felt best fitted across the school. And one of the first things that my head teacher did, and our parent council helped with this, is we bought a large set of blocks for every single class all the way up to primary 7. And going back to the earlier point, what primary 1s did with the blocks compared to what my primary 7s did with the blocks was, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I'll tell you the story why we decided to go into block play was during COVID, we were a hub, and we had a mixture of children coming in, obviously because their parents were key workers. And we had set up play spaces whilst the children were coming into the hub. One of the things that we had out was large block play and small block play. And when I was in the hub, wow, there was children in that hub from primary 1 to primary 7 all playing in the blocks together, not parallel play, working together and building things. And the older boys and girls in primary 6, 7 or wherever they were instructing, directing the younger children. They were sharing their knowledge about, size and shape and volume and balance and all these sorts of things. And that actually is what I went back to my head teacher and I said, you'll never believe the level of engagement, motivation, and the learning that I have just witnessed in 15 minutes because these children are all in one room together playing with these blocks. I says, that just shows you we need blocks and that's kind of what started the block play all the way up to school.
It probably also shows we need mixed age play as well, and it's actually beneficial for little ones as well as, because obviously we look at mixed age play and think, oh, it's really good for the wee ones to be able to be sort of instructed by the older ones, but sometimes it's nice actually the other way down, isn't it?
Yeah.
From the bigger ones can be wee again, because there's so much pressures, I think, on children to get things right as well nowadays. You're so pressured.
Yeah, totally. And I'm thinking outside now about the other spaces. One of the other things that worked really well was we had lots of dressing up. And when I say dressing up, not costumes, but lots of bags and hats and scarves and material and things like that. So it can be anything on any given day. But we also put that into our upper school classrooms. And what ended up happening was in primary 5, they had this kind of dressing up box. And during their protected playtime, they obviously explored this. They ended up putting on a play of Little Women, because that was a book that they were reading or something. And they ended up putting on a play. And that was sparked from that dressing up box. And it became so successful that the children actually legged that learning. They then put it on show for the rest of the school. And then they also did it to parents. And that came from a dressing up box. And that's one of the real success stories that came out. And equally, that was also because the primary 5 teacher at Aberdour was also invested in play and really wanted to make it work in their classroom. It was phenomenal. That was a really great piece of work. And it really showed impact of our play pedagogy right across the school.
If you were to reflect on that and do observations on that, if you think of the amount of things that you actually cover there under the curriculum for excellence, it's just tremendous. You've got literacy, imagination, you've got drama. There's so many things working together, social, all these wonderful things actually that you probably wouldn't have been able to plan for that actually. Because I know certainly a lot of the schools I work with will say that, they do a lot of retrospective planning nowadays. They obviously have a certain amount of they've planned intentional planning, but they do an awful lot of retrospective planning. And a lot of them say they cover E's and O's or benchmarks that they normally wouldn't cover. But there's sometimes they find really difficult to plan for, but it's because the children have taken that learning in a slightly different direction. And because the teachers, observed and facilitated that and supported that and gone with it, then, you've got that really rich learning experience. I mean, that's tremendous.
And you made a really valid point there, is that play pedagogy will only work with the skill set of the teacher that is in the room. Play pedagogy doesn't work on its own. It definitely doesn't work. Children will naturally play brilliantly, and they will find avenues to extend and, progress their play, but only to a certain point, because they still are within the constraints of a classroom and they're still in with the constraints of the resources that are there for them to use. So you're absolutely right. It's down to the passion and the skill set of that class teacher and really using those observations to do that retrospective planning or to think about their intentional planning in a different way, and how play pedagogy fits into that.
Absolutely. And it's lovely to see that. And I find as well, because I know obviously on your Facebook group, you've got suggestions and things as well, but it's so important, isn't it, that it doesn't look the same in every school. I think we need to recognise that. I love the fact that you you'll give people ideas, but actually you'll say that to them, like this might look different in your setting, and I think that's really important, that it's not this one size fits all, because I know with the award that we work with so many different schools. I purposely picked small schools, large schools, urban schools, rural schools, and all these things, and everybody's doing it in a different way, but it's amazing what people are actually doing.
Yeah.
When I meet up with my schools, it warms my heart, like, to see what actually is being done, and the motivation of the teachers that are actually doing it, and it just makes such a difference to like the behaviour and things as well. The amount of times I've been in a class and they've said to me, see those two wee children there, they're usually quite disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
But because they've obviously made that really great environment, the children, for instance, I was at one where there was two boys at a tinker table nearly the whole time I was in, and they were doing so much learning and problem solving and working together, and it was fantastic to see, actually. And the teacher said usually they're quite disruptive in the class, but because they were actually doing something they were really interested in, and obviously they were learning like so much as well. They were like using different sizes of blocks and things. So, if you think of like all the other things that actually happened, they were using communication, problem solving. They'd made something that looked a wee bit like a windmill, and had gone over to the teacher and said, how do we get this to stand up? And she said, well, actually, how do you think you would get it to stand up? So rather than sort of, the teacher used her skills there, rather than say, well, actually, if you do this, this, this and this, it'll do it. So she actually made them go away and have a wee think about it, and think about like things that they know, that she sort of encouraged them to think about, like real life things that they've seen, like, well, wow, how does that work? Is things bigger on the bottom? It's fantastic. To be fair, when I left, they still hadn't got it to stand up, but I mean, they were having a good go at it. And maybe if I'd gone down in a couple of days' time again, maybe this would be this wonderful windmill that's standing up. But if you think of all the skills that those children have got there, that's like how architecture starts, like that construction. It's amazing.
Children asking that question makes me so happy. We want children, or we want adults who question things. We want them to question, why does that work? Why does it not work? What can I do to solve it? That's what people want in the workforce. And actually, I was at Fife doing a transforming learning project at the moment, and we're bringing in iPads for primary sixes all the way up to S6. It's a huge project. It's been a few years in the making. I think we're about the 12th council to do it. But I was at a transforming learning conference. There was a gentleman there, and he shared the skill set of what employers are looking for in the future from our young children. And I was looking at it and I was going, yeah, play pedagogy does that. Yeah, play pedagogy does that. Oh yeah, play pedagogy does that. And honestly, I was so affirming. I didn't say it in the room. I was tempted to.
Oh, you should.
But I just thought, there's another argument. I actually was going to put that up on my play piece. I need to write myself a note to remind me to do that, because I wrote down, I thought, I'm going to share this skill set. It comes from a world, I can't remember what it was, but it comes from...
is it like World of Work?
Not the World of Work, but it comes from a collection of skill set from across the world of what employers across the world are looking for. So it's a worldwide type skill set. And I just looked at it and I thought, play pedagogy ticks all those skills. So we're giving children the opportunity to engage in play, naturally, and it's a natural thing. And this is what I keep saying to people. It's so natural. It's so easy to do. And talking about the children you were talking about, sometimes I do hear, oh, well, it won't work in my class because some of my children are quite highly dysregulated. And I appreciate for some children, it won't work for them. But that's due to the environment, not necessarily that they can't play. Because I really hate hearing that, people saying, oh, well, my children can't play. Absolutely argue the point that all children can play. All children can play. It's finding the right environment where they feel the impulse to play in that particular environment. So I recognise that, play is different in every context. It also, takes a lot of time to get right. There are children dysregulated in our classes, which, is a barrier sometimes to play pedagogy working as successfully as we would like. But that's nothing to do with the play. That's to do with where the child is at that particular moment. Children with ASN, I appreciate that some children with ASN find it really difficult to engage in play pedagogy as well. Again, that's down to their ASN needs. It's not down to the play. that we're providing. And I think that's really, really an important point. And actually, I would argue that play is something that children do need more than anything. If we can't give them anything else, we can give them play, because that's the only thing that naturally children know how to do. We don't never need to instruct them or direct them on how to play with something. They just know how to do it.
I think that's true as well. And I think it's recognising that play for every child looks different as well. You know, it doesn't always look the same, you know, and I think that's whenever sometimes we say, oh, these children don't play. Actually, maybe then we need to look at that and observe that a wee bit longer to actually see, well, actually, how are they playing?
Yeah.
It's maybe not the way that we would necessarily recognise as play, but it might be that's how they play, you know.
Yeah.
And you're never told to play, are you? I
No, absolutely
think, you know, I
not.
still like diddling about in my garden, you know, but I would say that's play for me.
Yeah.
We would just call it hobbies and
we just call
leisure
it-
activities now.
Yeah, we call it a different name, don't we? We call it a different name, but something that we intrinsically motivating us to do, that is something that we enjoy doing, and that is adult play, absolutely.
One of the schools I work with, actually, their primary 7 class goes into, there's an old people's home, not that far from the school, and it's lovely, actually, and they say that it's great, like the children call them their grand friends. You know, you've
Right.
got that intergenerational play, which is wonderful. And one of the best things I love is the fact that the teacher who takes them in, Liz down at Eyemouth, her old teacher is actually in this care home. So she's actually taking the children in now to play with her teacher. And isn't that a wonderful thing? Like the circle, like it's...
Oh, wow.
and the rich learning that comes out with that, you know, with
That's
one of the days I was
lovely.
been down for a visit, and she was telling me about a girl who doesn't really like doing a lot of literacy, you know, doesn't like
Yeah.
doing a lot of writing. But every single time she goes out to visit in the care home and she comes back, she's like, can I have another piece of paper? And she's writing about the stories that she really enjoys, like, you know, what she's done with the older people and the things that she's done and the things she's learned. And isn't that lovely that this child who would say probably wouldn't be a writer, you know, but again, it's finding something that they're interested in doing. They maybe just don't like writing in a formal way, but, you know, obviously there is that passion for writing there, you know, and again, it's us as teachers that you sometimes need to sort of recognise that and, you know, go with that. One wee tip then for teachers or parents as well who want to support play but aren't sure where to start, where would you say to start?
Oh, wow. I would start with the child. That's the place to start. Ask the child what they're interested in. You know, I mean, people will know their children best. And I think people think play is this massive thing that they have to do. It actually is just something that children do naturally. I know my son in particular really loved vehicles and things. So, and he's still into vehicles. He's actually now learning to be a pilot, would you believe? But he has been so into vehicles since he was a very young age. So I honed right in on that. And so did my mum. We gave them lots of vehicles to play with. So I think the starting point is the child. The starting point is the child, and really understanding, whether you're a class teacher or a parent, understanding what really motivates your child. What do they really love to play with? What really excites them in play, and providing as much of that for them as possible.
Wonderful. What a great answer. Finally, I'm going to ask a magic wand question. So this is a really tricky one, actually. If you could change one thing about how schools in Scotland support play, what would it be?
Change one thing in how they support play.
Not necessarily one thing. It can be a few things.
I think I just go back to that earlier point that I made. If I'm talking about one thing, or if I'm thinking about my aspirations for the future of play in Scotland, is just that we get more weight behind it, and that everybody in society recognises just how important play is for children, and not just for children, but for families and for adults and for our society as a whole, and certainly for our classroom environments. And one thing I would like to see change is just for teachers to have that autonomy over embracing play pedagogy more and more in their classroom, and using it as an approach to teaching and learning. Not the only approach, but certainly one of the central approaches, and especially in the younger years. So the transition through school is a lot smoother for the children.
Leanne, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a lovely experience, conversation with you, really inspiring. It's such a brilliant example of how one person can make such a huge difference as well. You really have. It's amazing. So for anyone listening who wants to follow Leanne's work or check out Play Piece on Facebook, we'll pop all the links in the notes. And thanks again for listening. And let's keep choosing play every day.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your preferred app. To find out more about Play Scotland, please follow us on Blue Sky and visit our website at playscotland.org.